Hello. This recording is to help you plan your work for this semester, for this module, whilst also talking about what we can learn from the first semester and the coursework that was done for that. So, to explain the scheme of work, you see these initials, the B1s, the B2s, the B3s, the B4s and the B5s. So hopefully this makes it clear that these are the five exam areas that you'll be assessed on, and you need to choose two. So any combination of two are acceptable. So that's that's what the course is. So we are slightly ahead of ourselves because the lecture notes have already been given out for B1. But as you can see, for each topic, certainly for the first three, there are 2 weeks devoted to each of those topics. So there is an assessment clinic scheduled there, and there are 4 sessions at the end of the module. So what we can do is we can move these sessions somewhere around here after each topic has been done, if that's what people want, or we can get the content across first and then do that work then. Well, what I'll do is I'll get your opinions through Socrative Student, which is now working fine, I hope, and then you just let me know. So as I say, so the idea is primarily to get the content over as fast as we can, with then looking at the assessment, but we can definitely move that around to whatever suits you. And the assessment clinics, by that time we might be face to face, or I would imagine them being on MS Teams, or just a phone conversation. I don't know. Whatever. Again, I'll ask your opinion on what kind of format you want these clinics to take. The whole point of the scheme of work is getting us to that point on the 24th of May, when everybody's in a position where they've got 2 really good answers to the questions that they've chosen. Now, many of the areas do overlap into different questions. So, if you decided already, or if you decide later on in the module that you're not doing a particular topic, please still engage with it, because some of the principles, some of the learning might be relevant to that area. So that kind of thinking like that is the same for what I want to talk about in terms of the first semester and the assessment in the first semester, because the feedback that I'm going to give that's on the progress document I'm going to talk about now apply regardless to which question you answered. Both questions were similar. Both were about your views on the research and scholarship, in either the penal populism, penal policy area, or in terms of visual criminology. So it's your informed views. And your views are informed if you read the research and scholarship. And I think that was the really good thing about this assessment, that the answers had some really good, strong bibliographies, and referenced really well. So it was clear that the students, that got good grades were engaging with the research and scholarship, with the stuff that's on Moodle. So basically, what was really impressive was, with the penal policy question, some really good descriptions of the characteristics of populism. So many people talked about the 3 different characteristics. One of them, this strongman kind of approach to politics. It was described well, but as I've said there, more criticality was needed. Surely a strongman kind of politics, where you've got the inability to make unpopular but necessary decisions, have surely shown themselves in countries across the world that have suffered with the coronavirus. Again, I don't want your essay to be about, or you think it to be about coronavirus. Use that kind of thought, that kind of critique of populism, to apply in other areas of penal populism. So there is this, resistance to taking unpopular decisions. So think about it in your areas of study, or in the areas that you're going to do in this exam. What are these things that are needed for creating a better system? And I think all of us can write a bit more about what a better system looks like. And this semester we will take that point further. But even though there's going to be lots of academic evidence in favour of these things, they will face barriers. So again, we need to be a bit more aware, a bit more critical, that just because there's research out there that says certain things, that does not mean that it's going to end up as policy. So again, a bit more critical thinking in terms of the new elite for policy making. Who are the people that make policy? Is the thing that you need to be addressing. The second bullet point, in some ways maybe should have been the first, because I'm assuming that unpopular, things are maybe more liberal, maybe more rehabilitative or more reparative forms of justice. Do we actually know that doing things like this, so in other words, having less punishment in the traditional sense, do we actually know that it is unpopular? Now, the good answers in this question show that there is plenty of evidence that shows that the public might not be as punitive as the populists assume or guess, or even don't care. I mean, that's up to you to think about. But there is plenty of evidence to show that, I say it again, the public might not be as punitive as what people say they are. That what was really good about the students that did really well in this part was the research aspect to it. So some really good points about how deliberative polls get different results, vignettes, the you are the judge type sentencing initiatives. So really good descriptions. So, keep that stuff. Surely you're going to need that in other modules and maybe in the course later on. Well, definitely thinking about this sentence here. Why are these methods better for finding the truth? Why is a deliberative poll better than a quantitative survey? For example, what forms of bias do they remove? So that point, thinking about bias in the research, many students did talk about it, and that was really good. Let's have it more consistent. Let's have everybody writing about that. So in terms of the visual crim question, what really did need to be talked about more was the question of ethics in this type of research. I mean, if you're looking at some of the sources that's on Moodle, like the why do sex offenders record their crimes, or looking at all the war images, the images of torture in prisoner of war camps and stuff like that. It makes me feel uncomfortable looking at the stuff that we do. Again, it's more, some really good descriptions of visual criminology, but more critical thinking about its approach. There isn't an easy answer to the stuff that I've mentioned. In the same way, there's no easy answer to whether it's a reliable form of research and whether it has validity. So my advice to you is get back to week 2 of this progress document, where, I'll put it up now, where we have this summary of the differences between quantitative and qualitative research, and basically thinking about these different approaches. So again, talking about reliability and validity there. So please get back to that when you can. Okay. So as I say, those are general kind of points about either penal policy or visual crim. But I hope you're getting the value of writing about research and having an opinion about research, which leads us to the second point of this recording, is reviewing what we've already done in the module. I'm now talking about the last lecture that we did about your future and the future for criminal justice policy. So again, I want to remind you of where do you stand on the quantitative, qualitative dichotomy. The dichotomy is where you've got a forced choice. You've got to choose either yes, no, true, false. So you call that kind of thing a dichotomy. A dichotomy is a bit more complicated than that. Quantitative values, qualitative values. It's where you have a clash of values normally is what you talk about with a dichotomy. So where do you stand on that? Which is superior to you? Again, I think we can be more critical when we're talking about the superiority of some forms of research compared to other forms. But what do other people think is superior, and why do they have these things? These are all things that you must think about a bit more. So, in terms of using the word proof, I would be very cautious of using the word proof in things that I write. Because it's hard to explain what it actually is. I suppose my best kind of answer could be, well, what we believe as proof, what we accept as proof, changes over time. Criminology, does provide this. Now, in terms of the proof or in terms of the evidence from criminology, again, maybe a bit more, awareness of this thing that, that the expansion of research in terms of Lombroso and the positivists' research, signalled the beginning of widespread penal expansions all across European countries. And it's these kinds of, carrying on with the quote there, prisons becoming laboratories, professionals, you've got a whole industry. So those links between research and penal expansionism should be should be thought about, because it makes you think of, as it says there, who's leading who when you're doing this research. Is it researchers leading it the way, or is it other people with their interests and stuff like that who are then creating the research that then finds what they want to find? Really difficult question. So there's no easy answer. It's not penal populism. There isn't an easy answer to this. But what I advise you to do is just think hard about, about the differences between quantitative and qualitative research. So I've put here a really long quote from Roger Hood from a few years ago, where he's talking about criminologists have joined the anti-numbers brigade. So in other words, in that sense, you're basically saying anti-positivists. As he says there, a few lines down, criminologists are staunchly anti-positivist. So it's a stigmatising term rather than denoting a wholesale rejection of science. It's a negative, very negative term. So in terms of criminology's traditions, we're looking here that valid data can only be got through qualitative appreciations, according to the position of individuals. This interpretive kind of is approach. Now, what Hood then says, so he then takes his own view. So qualitative work has its place, but it's not always appropriate to the issue being researched. That is the absolute key. What you need to be thinking about is what is appropriate to your issue. So rather than have I'm quantitative or I'm qualitative and being biased like that, you be flexible and what is appropriate. Again, there's some good points in this quote, in that, policymakers, require reliable, replicable observations based on representative samples. So we might be opposed to quantitative research, but it might be necessary. He would say that criminologists, endangered our credibility by rejecting, quantitative research, and then this pretty famous quote of his about saying that the research showing the links between smoking and lung cancer became about because of quantitative research. It wouldn't have come through qualitative research. So anyway, that's something to think about. Again, there isn't an easy answer, but the answer is think about what's best for your particular question. And finally, again, just so we can be a bit more critical about research, let's recognise more of the harm that research does. If you don't aware of what we did in the last lecture, look up the research from CICCJ et al, because their research arguably has hacked democracy. That might be a bit extreme to say that, or it's up to you. It certainly helped the election of Donald Trump, and it certainly helped the Brexit referendum. So basically. So thinking about harm, as I say, I think you need to think about harm more. Harm to democracy is a significant harm. It's a wide harm, so in other words, it's a macro harm. Now, the opposite of macro is micro, so on an individual basis. So if you're researching with people, your harm might be micro to that individual. So micro is an individual, macro is massively broad, meso is in the middle. So at a micro level, individuals are harmed by giving up their time to participate. So again, carrying on this theme of what is superior research, then according to Webb et al. In 1966, research that used unobtrusive measures might be the superior form of research. So there's a link there to Wikipedia. Obviously never reference it, but read that, because, as I say, in terms of ethics, you could learn a lot by thinking about, give just half an hour or so thinking about, the value of using unobtrusive measures for removing bias. So, as I say, that's what I wanted to get across, and I hope this helps. Thank you.